Show me the prison, show me the jail, show me the prisoner whose life has grown stale. And I'll show you a young man with so many reasons why. There but for fortune go you or I. Folks who follow me know that I spent a long time in prison. I spent 33 years in prison, and a lot of people were saying, well, did you spend 20 here? Did you do that? I see 20, I see 19, I see this. Well, it all adds up to 33 years. And I was sitting here the other night, and I said, I'm gonna tell them. So I added it up. So I was in 28 different prisons, or some of them, a few of them were just jails. But I was a prisoner in there, so I'm gonna count them. I didn't stay long, maybe a day or two, but I was in 28 different prisons and jails in the world. Now, I guess if they give out PhDs, I would have a PhD in prisonology. I know a lot about it. I went through it. So I'm going to start, and I'm going to tell about each one of these prisons that I was in and how long I stayed there, and something a little bit, just an anecdote about what it was like. I'm not going to go into depth. I went into that in my book. And I'll advertise my book right here. Here's Smuggler, a memoir by Roger Reeves. And it's got some interesting fellows on the front there. There was Pablo Escobar, Jorge Ochoa, Barry Seal, the one that made the movie with Tom Cruise, America Made, and Roger. That come from, my picture there came from National Geographic, came to Australia and did a documentary called Australia's Hardest Prison. I was there. Okay, that's my advertisement for today. Now, the first one was in Peru. Let me tell you about that. When I first made a little money, not little money, I made $300,000. And I wanted to go back to the farm in Georgia where I was raised. And my wife was just dead set against it. Said, oh, you don't remember the rattlesnakes and the cottonmouth moccasins and all the ticks and the bugs and the flies. We did have a farm with chicken houses, and there was a bunch of all that around there. But I remembered going fishing in the creeks and the hunting and all that. So I wanted to go back. So we decided if we didn't go back to Georgia, let's go down to Brazil and see about growing soybeans. Some of the cattle ranches, didn't have enough money to get in that big, but at the time you could go soybeans. So we flew through the Caribbean in a Cessna 182, four-seater Cessna. I really enjoyed that plane. Maybe I'll buy another one day. And went on down to the southern part of Brazil and went out towards Paraguay. And I was impressed. They had them big D8 tractors, and they would have a chain between them. I guess the chain was over 100 feet long, maybe 150 feet. And they were dragging those trees down, mostly just scrub, kind of not desert country, but it was, that's where they started growing that soybeans. You could buy land for $6 an acre at that time. Now, ain't no telling what it's worth. They got roads going in there now. That time, there's not even any roads in there. You had to make your own. And to get across the river with your own ferry. But so Mari had to fly back. Our little youngest daughter was young, less about 2 years old. She was staying with our mother, so I went on. And so I decided I'd bring the plane back up the West Coast. We'd gone down through the Caribbean. And so I flew in to Curitiba. And I went there to a market, and they had fish hanging there. I guess those catfish was, or if it were catfish, I don't know if they were. They were 200 pounds or more, and there was a bunch of them there. They said, oh, yeah, we can catch them down there in the river. And so I said, well, anybody take me fishing? And they said, no, nobody. They don't have any of that business here, but there's a gringo down on the river, and go see him. So I got down to the river, and there was an old sailboat, I guess about 35 foot. And looked rather derelict. One old mast there looked like made out of some kind of a tree. And there's a rough-looking fella come there, invited me aboard, very friendly, English fella, and said his name was Thurston Jones, and we had a drink or two, and I asked him to take me fishing. He said no, he was a writer, and that he didn't have time for that, that he was going his way back to Europe, that he had spent a year at in the Dead Sea of Israel, 1,100 feet below sea level, and that was the lowest spot on earth that you could go and still breathe air. And then he sailed his boat around the Horn and came up to the west coast of Peru, and that's the only coast Peru's got. So he had a train bring his boat up to Lake Titicaca. I think it's about 8,000 or 9,000 feet high. It's the highest navigable lake in the world. And he stayed up there a year. And then he had the train. He put his boat on a flat car and had it brought down to the river. And when he said he was an author, I thought, yeah, I can fly an airplane. I'm an astronaut too. But when I got to the bookstore, there was his books was all over the place. He was the best-selling author of Ice and The Incredible Voyage and a bunch more of them. What a good read it was. But I misjudged that fella. So I left Curitiba, and I was going to Cusco. That's where you catch a little train and go to Machu Picchu. Well, I filed a flight plan and went over the Andes, and it was really high. I had to really strain to get over the pass. And I landed at Cusco, and nice people took my passport and stamped it. And then they called customs stuff. They said, no, this is not a port of entry. You can't enter here. I said, well, here, my Jepson charts and all my books is a port of entry. Yes, but 3 weeks ago, we decided it's not a port of entry anymore, and Peru closed that. You will have to go to Lima and clear customs. I said, man. And they said, no, you're grounded. We got your airplane. They went out and put a piece of tape over the door and said, you'll have to catch the bus to Lima and get this cleared up. Well, I didn't know it at the time. They were just looking for a bite. I bet $100 would have cleared that right up, but I didn't know it at the time. That was my first experience with that. So I went to the hotel and met a lot of people there. I mean, in that little town, it was death by tourism. Everybody was there to go see Machu Picchu. And I don't remember what it was, but them little dingy hotels was expensive. So I met up with some Americans, and they were going, and they had the ticket on a train. It's a little narrow gauge railroad with a pretty little steam engine. It was rather picturesque, so I went down with them the next morning. My first job ever after I got out of high school was working on a railroad, so I drove trains, and I knew a little bit about it. So I got on with them, and the conductor came in at one end of the door, and I just went out and climbed up on top of the carriage, and as he went through checking all the tickets, I climbed down behind him, and everybody just give it a little clap. They would. I was their little hero. So anyway, I went to Machu Picchu, and folks, that's for me one of the wonders of the world. I always wondered how on earth did they put those stones. They were tons. I mean, I don't know how many tons, but some huge things, and they were fit right on top of one another, just like that, just exactly every little piece. It looked like wet concrete had been wet and put on top of each other, and I don't think that anybody could have chiseled that out. There've been some theories on it. But I read where one of those priests that was with the conquistadors when they came through there, that at night around the campfire that they had some of the native people, that they had some grass juice, that I believe is what he said, and he poured it on his spurs. They poured it on, just showed him, and he could tie it in a knot like it was a rope. And the next morning it was completely stiff where he had tied his spurs. So possibly they put that on the stones and softened them so that they would fit like that. It looks like that anyway, but I just don't know. Anyway, I go back the next day, and of course they won't let me go. They tell me to go to Lima. So just before daylight, I go out to the airport, and there was a gas truck man there, and I tell him I want him to gas me up. Now, no, it's not open, so I gave him $100, and he went up and gassed my airplane up. I took the tape off the door and took off. And while I was going down the taxiway, a Jeep come flying out of there, and he had a machine gun on the back of it and red flashing lights and shining lights at me. So I just took off on the taxiway, and I headed north. I said, I'm going to Ecuador. I ain't fooling with them people go to Lima. It's a long way. So I was flying. I had a little headwind, and they kept telling me all day, for 4 or 5 hours, Lima, I forget what the number was, 727 Juliet, whatever, and go to Lima. So I kept going north. But when I got to Chimbote, I was running low on fuel. And wasn't a big town, and the airport was out of ways, it was a dirt strip, sand. And I landed and taxied up, got out, told the fellow I needed some gasoline. And he was very friendly. He says, all right, I'll call the gas truck man. He'll come and gas you up. Well, he picked up the phone, called the police. They'd been looking for me everywhere, I reckon. So out come the police, and they handcuffed me. Took my airplane, put more tape on the doors, and pushed it over to one side and blocked it up. And we went downtown Chimbote, and what a stinking place it is. In Louisiana, we call them pogie boats, but I don't know what they call them down here, but they catch little fish and make fertilizer out of them. And that stuff will get in the pores of your skin, up your nose, and in your ears. It's just like a dust of fish, dried fish. I guess they get thousands and thousands of tons of it. Well, they chained me, they didn't take me in a jail, but they put me like, I guess it must have been somewhat of a city hall or something. There was a big old table there, oak, and they handcuffed me to a water pipe. I mean, it was a big one, too. I think they might have put a little chain on there so I could have a little bit of room and a slop jar under that table, and that was it, baby. And I stayed right there chained to on that table for 3 days. I mean, I didn't have a pillow, a blanket, and nothing. They bring me a little beans and rice every once in a while. I didn't starve. And I had a jug of water. And they was all right. They just waited until they could get up a load to go to Lima. So one morning they came got me, and we loaded up in a flatbed truck. They must have been 10 of them on there, 2 or 3 of them in the front, all of them with their guns, and they took me to Lima. And we stopped at every greasy truck stop on the way. And I mean, they drank beer and ate rice and whatever else was food. It tasted pretty good. And I guess yours truly paid for it. It wasn't nothing. So when they got to Lima, they took me right to the big prison and put me in there. Well, nothing I could do about it. That thing was all right. Just a dirty place, just old. So the next morning, about 9 o'clock, there was American, what was it called, embassy person from the United States. I forget what you call them. But anyway, a consulate. He came out to see me, and he had some kind of chief of police or the people that was in charge of the air rights of Peru. And he told me that if I would pay a policeman, they had a policeman there, and to stay with me in the hotel, that I could go to the Crayon Hotel and stay there. But I had to stay with that policeman or I'd stay locked up. So the policeman was a nice young man. We took off and got 2 rooms there at the hotel. And it was pretty nice. We walk around town, do what we wanted to do, and I met a lot of people, a lot of a crew coming in there with the airlines. And I had a pretty good time. So stayed there, for, I guess, 4 or 5 days. And then one morning I was shaving. But by that time I couldn't find a policeman. He just had the room, and he just was there in name only. They knew they had my airplane up at Chimbote and had my passport. I wasn't going anywhere. So I was shaving and had one side of my face shaved, and the other side still had all the white soap on it. And the door went going tick, 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 tick. And I figured an earthquake was coming. And I ran to the window and looked out, and I could see it looked like rolling waves coming through the earth. And they come fast. I mean, it wasn't like it was going to be a while. They got there. I don't know how fast they traveled, but it was zooming. It was there. And I saw buildings falling and slamming into each other and turned to dust and falling down. And I was on the, I guess, first or second floor, maybe the second floor. And the canopy was right under it. And I thought that building might come down. So I jumped out that window barefooted and hit that canvas top of that canopy that was going out for the cars to go under, and slid down in the street and watched to see if that building would come down. Well, it didn't. Anyhow, it was a mess there. It certainly was. I jumped on and helped some firemen, and it was open, went back and got my shoes and blue jeans and shirt. And I worked the whole day long with those people. But it tore up the runway there. I guess they said that there was concrete sticking up 4 foot thick. sticking up in the air broke into where the runway is, so the airplanes couldn't land there for a while. Anyway, after about a week, 10 days, I went before a judge, and they charged me $700 for violating the airspace. And then I had to get a bus back up to Chimbote. An all-day job ride up there. Maybe it was all day, but anyway, it was a long way. And I got back to Chimbote, went to my airplane. Everything in it. I'd had all kinds of little artifacts that I bought from the indigenous people there in the jungle. Little bows and arrows and feathers and little whatnots that I wanted to take home with me. All of that was gone, and all the radios was out of the airplane. The police had stolen everything on it and put the tape back. So I didn't even have a radio to get out of there with. But anyway, I went on to Ecuador and went to Guayaquil, and I circled and circled, and he gave me a green light, and I landed there and cleared customs. Very nice people. And I bought a little handheld radio that I got home with, so I could call towers along the way. But I had no navigation whatsoever. I just followed the coastline. And I went to see the shrimp farms. They're just starting shrimp farms, and the bank there would finance 90% of the cost of it. And I looked at that, and that was one of the interesting things I saw along the way. And so then I took off from Ecuador, and I flew in. Of all places, I landed in Medellin, Colombia. I didn't have any idea that I'd be going back there one time and seeing those people. I had no idea that I was sitting right on top of the cocaine capital of the world. Anyhow, folks, that was the first time that I was arrested. And so tomorrow, the next day, I'll tell you the second time. I'll do one at a time.